English translation. 144th contact. Thursday, 26th March, 1981, 3:16 hours.
Today, I want to finish what was denied to me during my last visit due to lack of time. I said that it is now the time when you should finally try to search for a further mission dissemination beyond your homeland.
I remember it well, but you have said that traitors are now in my own ranks, who want to work against me and destroy our mission, as well as our group members and me.
Sure, I spoke of that. Nevertheless, things have expanded in the meantime and have formed organizationally, whereby the authorities are now also collaborating.
I am not afraid of that. I told you this.
Of course, but the intrigues against you are already at the stage where official, defamatory machinations can bring you danger. And you know, nevertheless, that in this case, nothing can be done against it. The Swiss authorities have already been a nasty thorn in your side for decades, which has become, in the course of the last 4 years, an entire briar patch. Even the Swiss military forces have already been working for some time against you, because on the one hand, you have lived for 4 years in dangerous proximity to one of their rocket bases, and on the other hand, because they have already, for years, become very insecure with regard to your contacts with us. For this reason, you are also constantly and sharply observed by them and monitored, and they do not even shrink back from monitoring your telephone calls and those of your group members. Of course, all of this will never be officially admitted, but this incontestable fact still remains. Some of the on-duty elements of the rocket base have been unofficially assigned to monitor you and have been instructed always to deny all of your statements and evidence as untruths if you step to the public with new information. So, for example, the instruction was issued that if you show new photographic material, then it should be maintained by the officers on duty of the rocket base that they observed how you faked these pictures with a model, etc. These statements were proven by the intelligence service's microfilms in the year 1991.
But this does not bother me.
This should, however, because the time has arrived when you will come, through such lies, into harm. What has never been the case with all your personalities in your multi-millennial mission, namely, that special organizations have formed with the assistance of the authorities and governments, in order now, finally, to prevent the permeating and spreading of the truth by you, and also to destroy you, all your group members, and the entire mission. Through the deliberate traitors, who are often paid for their shameful activities, or through those who are easily influenced or those who have become sick in consciousness. Virtually all ufological groups have become prejudiced against you and all our work, particularly in Europe, but also in other countries, under whom also all of the fallible group members fall. In particular, just the traitors Hans Jakob, H. Ace, and his brother K. bear the guilt for the fact that these slanderous intrigues were started against you and were brought into being, for which an evil fate will still redound to them, however. Since this time, mission-destroying and slanderous machinations have appeared against Billy from various UFO organizations around the world, like, for example, MUFON, etc., proving the statements made here by Simya say, Killer, query.
But still today, I just do not understand why H has begun to work against me in this manner. With K, I know the reason, because he is absolutely enslaved by his brother and hopelessly influenced by him. So he is no longer able, in this connection, to think and act freely or logically. He is practically the consciousness slave of his brother, while Hans Jakob has, on the one hand, gotten into the devil's kitchen via sectarian conflicts, and on the other hand, because he could not cope with the fact that it was denied to him to take my place, which he wanted to gain by all means.
These really are the facts of the truth. With HE, the reason is a little more complicated. He has built his whole life on lies and deception, which he also demonstrated during his group membership. On the one hand, he worked in a scheming and mendacious manner for you and our mission. But on the other hand, he simultaneously worked treacherously for hostile-minded elements who only worked with regard to destroying you and the truth. These treacherous actions toward you and the mission brought H into the severest conflicts of conscience when he suddenly realized with absolute certainty who you are in truth and that everything you offered corresponds to the absolute truth. These conflicts within him finally led him to the case because through his steady insistence of getting in touch with me, I allowed myself to be led to approach him in my ship so close that he came into my personal swinging wave field. Thus, he suddenly became aware of the true love and peace, which seemed like a paradise to him. But disaster immediately fell upon him when I went away again, and he fell out of my swinging wave field. It seemed like the end of the world to him, which made him deal with suicidal intentions, from which I was able to prevent him only with great difficulty. For this reason, I tried to influence him to the better through my own swinging waves. But this was clearly wrong because he only responded to any attempt to help him on my part by starting to pity himself more and more. And at last, a dangerous hatred built up inside of him against everything that has to do with calm, peace, and love, as well as with truth. He worked it out in such a manner that it fixed itself as a delusion inside of him, from which he is also no longer able to free himself by all external assistance. He fortifies his lies today with such hatred that he accepts them as truth and therefore can no longer make a distinction between lie and truth. He has become a fanatical believer of his own lies, from which he cannot escape any more, particularly because his material consciousness was damaged by everything, by which means he is no longer accountable. Today, he exhibits consciousness-based injuries and psychopathic forms, which cannot be repaired anymore by earthly means.
You mean that he is therefore cuckoo?
I understand your illusion. Yes, that is so. He is not of sound mind in our interests anymore, and neither are all those who believe in him, because they have become subservient to him through his perfected lies and work for him against you, us, our entire mission, and against the group members.
You actually mean that also these people have material consciousness damage and thus can no longer think clearly or understand clearly, which is why they also cannot recognize the truth in our cause.
Sure, but the harm to the majority of these people could be repaired by themselves. So it is still curable. Their consciousness damage only rests in a single cell of their brain, in which consciousness-confusing acids have formed, which create a dependent bondage and which exclude the capacity to distinguish truth and falsehood. Neutral thinking without any prejudice would dissolve and eliminate these harmful acids in the aforesaid cell again. Nevertheless, if this does not happen, then everything will ultimately lead to the same end, to which H has hopelessly fallen.
A hard thing.
Indeed, but in the end, they will bear all the guilt themselves, for it is easier for them to let themselves be cheated than to operate intellectually and logically, in order to own the truth for themselves through this. For the Earth humans, thinking requires a lot more effort than just blindly giving themselves over to a faith that is built on lies and deceit. And all those who are subservient to the lies and deceit of Hans Jakob and the brothers H and K and all others who want to destroy you, the group members, us, and the entire mission, they all are not capable of logical thinking because this work is uncomfortable for them, and because not having to think spares them from any effort, and also seems to relieve them of any responsibility. But they deceive themselves very much in this because with their wrong behavior, they place an unusually heavy burden, load, and responsibility on themselves, which will one day collapse on them and which they will have to bear with difficulty. That still has not reached all of their consciousnesses, But these effects that are very vicious and sometimes even dangerous for them are already at hand. It is just that they do not know this yet.
There, I can probably also do nothing against it, in order to help these poor dogs. You know, somehow I just think that I should nevertheless have an informative influence on them.
That is neither your task, nor would it be effective, for it has already been determined by themselves in an unalterable form. Thus, pay no attention to them, but give the necessary attention to yourself, your group members, us, and the mission, so that you finally take that path underfoot, which we have encouraged you to take for the sake of spreading the mission for a long time. In regards to this, I have brought you some data for your orientation, which you can have a look at, after which you should then go and clarify everything and prepare for the reception of the mission. And remember, you as well as all your group members, that the time now begins to hurry, and that also the group members themselves are determined for this, even then, if they would separate from the core and deny everything. But on the other hand, we ourselves will not remain inactive, and will try everything to avert impending evils from you and the group members, as we have been striving for some time on advising the High Council also to influence certain developments in earthly politics, in order to prevent, through these influences, the Third World War, which still glimmers threateningly in the earthly fate sky, or at least to be able to alleviate it. But whether we will manage all this, time will prove, because in certain matters our hands are tied, so we must take very arduous paths, of which we cannot calculate with certainty whether they will be successful. This has arisen in such a manner because dangers have suddenly appeared that could allow the earthly Third World War to expand into a global catastrophe. But despite everything, there are still good prospects that everything will still turn to the good.
Once again, this is news. Why that now? I mean the global catastrophe?
For now, I still do not want to talk about that officially. It would be too dangerous. Plus, everything is still in the open, and particularly in the hands of America.
Then just unofficially. Is that possible?
Sure, but later.
Okay, girl. And in the morning, when the day breaks, I can finally take the first photos?
That you can. I will be here. But now I must go back, because in the meantime I still have some tasks to do. Goodbye.
So then, take care. At 5 o'clock, I will be waiting for you.
Sim Yase's wedding cake beam ship at a photo demonstration in Sekler near Durstalen. Billy told us that the first joggers appeared as early as 5 Ochars, which is why filming or photography was not possible. Nevertheless, he set up his apparatus and hurriedly took 14 pictures, but only 4 of them were usable. Sim Yase, who became extremely nervous during the rush, almost rammed his caravan, magnetizing the entire tractor and making it impossible for Billy to start. As Sim Yase could not help him, he had to wait until around 10-20 hours before Quetzal had time to demagnetize the tractor again with various devices and apertures. At about 10:50 HRs, the tractor was working again, but Billy discovered during a check that all the video films had become unusable. Quetzal took the video films for study purposes. At about 1710 HRs, he informed Billy telepathically that the ship's radiation was so strong that it would completely destroy the films if the ship approached below 471 meters. Slides and running films would also be affected by the strong magnetism if they were too close, causing the air to tremble and vibrate as if it were very hot, which is why the photos and films showed wave-like distortions of the ship's contours and had an asymmetrical effect. Even Billy's film box, which he had taken the precaution of lining with 6mm thick lead plates, was completely ineffective according to Quetzal. This problem was solved by Quetzal 2 days later. At about 11:15 hours, Billy left the remote Sekler, where Quetzal was also constantly kept from his work by walkers and farmers going about their business. In the 30 minutes that Quetzal worked on Billy's tractor, he had to teleport into the ship 3 times together with his equipment and fly away before he could return minutes later and continue working. Photo left, 26.3. 1981, 06:18 hours photo right, 26.3. 981, 8:06:19 hours. Both photos. Billy, Edward Albert Meyer. Auenberg Egg Girenbad near Hinwil, from treetop to treetop. Taken by Billy, who was sitting on a second ship at a height of about 40 meters. Photo 03.04. 981, 1310 Hertz's Billy Edward Albert Meyer. Auenberg Egg Girenbad near Hinwil, from treetop to treetop. Taken by Billy, who was sitting on a second ship at a height of about 40 meters. Photo 03.04. 1981, 1310 Hertz, Billy Edward Albert Meyer. Auenberg Egg Girenbad near Hinwil, from treetop to treetop. Taken by Billy, who was sitting on a second ship at a height of about 40 meters. Photo 03.04. 1981, 1310 Hertz, Billy Edward Albert Meyer. Auenberg Egg Girenbad near Hinwil, ship in front of young approx. Onbesmeter high weather for. Photo 03.04. 91, 14 Devateurs, Billy Edward Albert Meyer. Auenberg Egg Girenbad near Hinwil, ship in front of young approx. Meshmeter high weather for. Photo 03.04. 1981, 1430, here's some Billy Edward Albert Meyer. Auenberg Egg Girenbad near Hinwil, ship in front of young approx. Ombeshmetra high weather for. Photo 3.04. 1981, 1431 heard Billy Edward Albert Meyer. Auenberg Egg Girenbad near Hinwil, ship in front of young approx. Ombeshmeti high weather for. Photo 03.04. 1981, 1430 years. Billy Edward Albert Meyer. Auenberg Egg Girenbad near Hinwil, ship in front of young approx. Ombeshmeter high weather for. Photos 03.04. 1981, 1432 Hertz, Billy Edward Albert Meyer. Auenberg Egg Girenbad near Hinwil, ship, photographed from the roof of a caravan. Photo 03.04. 1981, 1433 Hertz, Billy Edward Albert Meyer. Auenberg Egg Girenbad near Hinwil. Broken tree rammed by Quetzal's ship and later transported with it to the edge of the forest. Photo 03.04. 1981, 1510 Hertz, Billy Edward Albert Meyer. Auenberg Egg Girenbad near Hinwil. Broken tree rammed by Quetzal's ship and later transported with it to the edge of the forest. Behind the tree, Billy's caravan with the Kubota tractor. Photo 03.04. 1981 1520 Hers. Billy Edward Albert Meyer. Auenberg Egg, Gierenbad, near Hinwil. The top of the fir tree rammed by Quetzal, leaning against Billy's Kubota tractor. Photo 03.04. Nain 1522 hacker Billy Edward Albert Meyer. Part of the fracture of the fir tree rammed by Quetzal. Billy deposited the broken piece of the trunk in the kitchen after his return from the photo work, where it warped considerably in the following hours before the eyes of those present. The tree resin flowed out in thick streams at the fracture points due to the magnetic effects. Photo 04.04. 981 1120 Hers of Billy Edward Albert Meyer.
Contact evidence by Bernadette Brand, Switzerland.
When Billy returned from a contact, it was a big event for us every time. It was good to sit around the table in the kitchen with a cup of coffee and listen to Billy telling the latest. News about the contacts with Quetzal or Sim Yase, or sharing the adventures he had had with them. Of course, we also asked him all kinds of questions because we wanted to know everything in detail, and such conversations often went on for hours. This was also the case on the late afternoon of Friday the 3rd of April 1981, when Billy returned from a contact with Quetzal, during which the two had worked together to photograph the so-called wedding cake ships. Billy was carrying a piece of wood, a broken piece of a fir trunk, which he placed next to the foot of the stairs in the kitchen before sitting down in his seat and asking Poppy to make him a coffee. I sat down in my usual place opposite him and waited to hear what Billy was about to say. To my right, behind me, lay the broken and lengthwise torn part of the trunk on the ground, which I looked at with great curiosity while I wondered why this trunk had been so badly damaged. One by one, everyone who was already home on this late Friday afternoon gathered in the kitchen and sat down around the kitchen table. Billy told them that he had met with Quetzal, who had 2 wedding cake ships with him, one manned and one unmanned, with which they were taking photographs. While they were working, Billy sat on the edge of the ship piloted by Quetzal with his camera and gave him telepathic instructions on how to steer his ship so that the stage 2nd unmanned ship came into the box well. All went well for a while until Quetzal misunderstood one of Billy's instructions and instead of stopping his ship, shot full speed towards the spruce tree in front of him, the trunk of which was then shattered and broken off by the force of the impacting magnetic field a few meters below the top. While Billy was talking and answering our frequent questions, I kept turning my head to look at the broken part of the trunk that was still lying next to the foot of the stairs. After about an hour, I realized that Billy had been keeping an eye on this very log the whole time, watching it. Now I finally took a closer look, and immediately I knew why this log had troubled and fascinated me so much. In the course of the hour, we were now sitting in the kitchen. One end of the trunk had curved upwards by at least 10 centimeters, so that the part of the trunk now looked as if a double curve, first running upwards and then horizontally again, had been pressed into it with tremendous might. At the same time, I also saw that streams of tree resin were seeping out of the piece of wood, filling the grooves and gullies of the broken wood like rivulets before running down over the bark. This sight struck me as if even the last drop of blood had been squeezed out of the log by the insane force of the magnetic field. But what was really amazing was the fact that the forces of the magnetic field of Quetzal's ship continued to have such an effect hours after the only momentary contact The trunk had broken up immediately, and the broken-off piece had fallen to the forest floor, that the wood was still working under their might. Needless to say, I could not keep my mouth shut, and said in the middle of the conversation, "Did you see that the log has warped about 10 centimeters in the last hour? It's still moving!" Now everyone surrounded the long, heavy piece of trunk, and sure enough, over the next half hour, we could all watch together as the wood arched up another 5 centimeters before the movement, then slowly stopped. All in all, since Billy had put it down carelessly at the foot of the stairs as an only slightly curved piece of wood with a few small spots of resin, it had arched up by about 20 centimeters, and the resin flowed in streams over the battered bark. It was somewhat oppressive for me to experience the effects of the magnetic fields of Quetzal's ship in this manner. Until now, wood had always been something stable and safe for me, and now I had to realize that forces exist under whose influence it behaves like malleable and kneadable plasticine, anything but safe and stable.